Multiple times throughout the topics in this section, I have mentioned chaining functions together to reach a result. We have a sequence of functions. A function receives input and returns output. That output becomes the input to the next function. That's what we're talking about here. We've had glimpses or pieces of this process, but now we are finally here. It is time to talk about this. It is time to talk about function composition. The whole idea of composition is to produce a more complex result out of several simpler components. So function composition is producing a more complex result or a function from several simpler functions. If pure functions are the foundation of functional programming, function composition is what makes that foundation workable. It allows us to piece together pure functions into more complex functions to solve problems. I think the best way to grasp this is with actual code. So let's jump in. All right, what I've got here is a string. It contains basically a list of words. Now notice that some of these words are repeated. In fact, garlic is repeated 3 times, I believe. Yeah, fence is repeated, bird is repeated. So there's some of these words that are repeated throughout this string. Now, this is kind of a simple idea, but let's say we wanted to use this to create some sort of passphrase or something like that. That's what we're going to do here. So I've listed down here 5 different functions we need to create to make this happen. I'm keeping these functions simple. I want these functions to be pure, have a single input and have a single output so that we're able to string them together. Now what I'm going to do, we'll make uppercase, everything uppercase, so we're dealing with the same case when we're trying to compare things. We're going to then convert the string to an array of words. We'll put them in an array so that we then can remove duplicates from that array. We'll remove duplicates from that array by converting it to a set. If you're not familiar with a set is a structure in JavaScript that only allows unique values. And so that's how we'll remove the duplicates. And then we'll convert the array-like, the set, back to an array. Anything that's array-like can be converted to an array. And then we'll convert that array to a string. So that's what we're going to do. That's the process we're going to take. So basically, the first function is going to process the words data here. It'll produce data, which will then be processed by the next function, which will produce data, processed by the next function, that will produce data, and so on. That is the process we're looking at here. Putting these functions together. And we're going to use function composition to do that. But we'll take this from the bottom up so that you understand once we get to the function composition part. So first thing I want to do is just create each of these functions. So let me go ahead and do that. Do that really quick. So first one I'm going to call make uppercase. And that's going to receive a string. And then what is it going to do? What is it going to return? It's going to return that string to uppercase. So this one's pretty easy. We have a function on the string prototype that allows us to do that conversion. All right, second one, convert the string to an array of words. And this also, we have a function that we can do this with. And so we're going to call this function string to array. And once again, it will receive a string. And then what will it return? Well, we're going to use the split method of strings, and we're going to split on the space. So basically when you split on the space, each one of the space here is how it's going to determine the difference between different elements of the array. And so each word will become an element in the array. So what's going to happen there? All right. Then we want to remove duplicates. Well, as I said, the way we do that is by converting the array to a set. By converting it to a set, duplicates are removed. So I'm going to call this one remove array duplicates. And this is going to receive an array. And then what are we going to return? Well, a new set. And that set is created from the array which is passed in. And by creating that set, the duplicates will be removed. Okay? And then we need to get that set back to an array. Now, this function that I'm going to create now can be used for anything that's array-like. It can be used for a node list, which is array-like. It can be used for arguments, which is array-like. It can be used for a set. There's a number of different things this could be used for. And this is what we're going to call it, is array-like to array. We're doing that conversion there. So it's going to receive something that is array-like, not an array, but it is an iterable, and it is array-like. And we're going to convert it by using our spread operator. We're going to spread out whatever that is passed in, and we're going to put it inside of square brackets, which will make it an array. All right, and then finally, we're going to have a function that can convert an array back into a string, which is what we eventually want to end up with. So we'll call this one simply array to string. And that's going to receive an array as well. And then what does it return? There is a join method on arrays that allows us to join elements of an array and create a string out of it. And what we pass into that join method is what's going to be placed in between each element. So we'll place a space back between each one of those, and that will allow us to convert that array back into a string. All right, so here we have our functions. Now, first thing I want to do, I want to go through the process of solving this. We're going to work on getting to compose incrementally because I want to make sure you understand it. So let's go through the process of how we could do this with what we know right now. So first off, we want to call make uppercase. And we're going to pass into that words, all right? Now, this would return something, and we could place it in a variable, and then pass that variable into the next function, and place that in a variable, pass into the next function, and so on. We could do that. Or we can immediately just pass the results into the next function like this. You've seen me do this before. We want to convert this string to an array. That's the next function I want to do. So the results of make uppercase are passed into string to array, and then the results of that are passed into remove array duplicates, like that. And then that is passed into array-like to array, so anything that's array-like, we're going to convert back into an array. And that's passed into, finally, array to string. One more paren here at the end. And then we could just put over here on this end, let results equal that. So if we save that, and let me come out here, we'll take a look at what we got inside of results. And there we can see that we have all the words are in uppercase, and we're looking to see those things that we had duplicates of to see if they've been removed. And we can see garlic, there's only one garlic. So the duplicates have been removed, and we're able to achieve our results. So that is one way to do it. And we already know how to do that. But as you can imagine, looking at that can be very intimidating. That is difficult to understand what is going on there. It's not clean. So what if we could do something like this? What if we had a function, and I'm going to call it unique passphrase, since that's what I'm trying to generate here. What if we could just pass in words to that, and that would give us the results? Okay. How could we set up a function, this unique passphrase function, that will do all of these that we've already created here? All right. If all of these are included in a function and they are all pure, then the resulting function will be pure. So how can we set that up? Well, what if we could do something like this? Here's where we'd create that function, unique pass phrase, and we call something called compose. All right, now you see where I'm headed with this. If we called something like compose and we just passed in each of these functions with a comma between them. Now notice that I'm doing this from the bottom. The function is called last is placed first, and then so on up. And I'm purposely doing it this way in this example because that is how compose works. Compose goes from bottom to top, just like what we had here. And so the very last function that I need to add to this is make uppercase, okay? So there we have our setup of what we want to be able to accomplish. I want to be able to call something called compose that will create this function for me, unique passphrase. And in that unique passphrase, I can pass in the data, the words string, and it will process all of those through that function. So I'm going to come back up here, and I'm going to do a first attempt at a compose function. We know we can do this type of thing. So if I have a very simple compose function that receives just two functions, fun1 and fun2, that's the variables I place them in, we could easily, watch this, we're going to return a function. What does this function do? Well, it takes in some data, in this case, the string up here, and what does it do with that data? Well, it first processes it using the second function passed in, and then processes the results of that using the first function passed in. So that would return a function for us that would do two of these. We could, for example, do the first two. We can see how that would work. Make uppercase would go into fun2, string to array would go into fun1. So make uppercase would process when this function is used. This is going to return a function, remember. And when this function is used, we'd pass in the words string. It would be processed by fun2. Whoop, I forgot to add that part there. Glad I looked at that. It would process that, and then the results of that would be processed by fun1. So see how we did that? So if we knew the number of functions we could pass in, we could build this. But what if we don't know the number of functions? We want to create a compose function that could be used generally without knowing exactly how many functions we have. So how do we set something up like that? Well, think about when we talked about reduce. It can take multiple things, even if we don't know how many there are, it can take multiple things and bring them to a single result. The single result would be a function. So let's tackle our compose function again. And this time we're going to use reduce. Now, before I get into this, I just want to let you know this can be a bit complex and can take some time to understand. Don't give up on it right away. If you don't get it right away, run this through a few times. Think about the code. Do the code on your own until you understand it. I think this is very important. Now, I'm creating a compose function here. Now, as you could probably guess, a lot of these functional libraries I've talked about in the past have compose functions. So you don't need to create a compose function. But I think it's good to understand how it works. And so that's why I want to create it. So bear with me as we do this. So I've commented out the old compose function, and we're going to do this again. And this compose function is going to receive any number of functions. And we want to gather those into an array. So we use the spread operator to do that. The spread rest operator, rest in this case, to do that. We're going to gather those into an array. And then we're going to return a function. So what we're returning here is a function. That function that is returned is going to use reduce method to do what we want to accomplish. All right. So the function will receive some data, which is going to be the words string that we have up here. And then it's going to process that and return the results. So here's where our processing takes place. Now, FNS is now an array. And remember, reduce acts on an array. So if we had passed in all these functions here, just like this, FNS would contain those. And then if we used reduce, it would act on this function first, and then this one. Well, remember with compose, we want to go from this side. We want to go from the right side. Well, there just happens to be a method that is just like reduce, and it's called reduce right. Okay, and that's what we're going to use because of the order we want to go in. Now, what do we pass into reduce? The same thing gets passed into reduce right. So what do we pass into reduce right? We pass in a callback function, and we pass in an initial value to the accumulator. All right. So the callback function, we need to at least get two values. One is the accumulator value. Remember, the accumulator value is what gets returned every time it iterates through. It'll iterate through this first function and return something. So it's going to return the results of this function. And then we'll apply it to the next function and so on. That's how we're going to make this happen. So we want a variable to represent the functions as we go through as well. So the first time through, FUN will have make uppercase. That's what's going to be there. All right. And so, so what do we want to do with that function that we have in FUN? Well, we want to process, we want to call that function and pass in the accumulator. Why the accumulator? Why do I pass in the accumulator? Well, let me finish this off really quick. The initial value of the accumulator is going to be what? It's going to be the data that's passed in. So this data that gets passed into the function, which will be the words string up there, that is the first thing that's going to be in the accumulator. That will be the first thing that's processed by this function here. That will return the results into the accumulator. Then the next time we iterate through, the function will be string to array. What is it going to process? The accumulator, which was the results of the previous iteration. All right. And we just keep going like that. So you see how it's doing exactly what we had up here in this commented out compose function, but it's doing it for any number of functions that we pass in. This is the power of reduce and reduce right. And that's one reason I wanted to show it to you as well. It's just really cool that we can create this type of thing, I think. All right. So we've got our compose function set up. Now this compose function can be used for anything now, but we're going to use it right here. We're going to set up a new function, unique passphrase, and then we'll call unique passphrase with words from up above, and we'll see if it does what we need it to do. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Let's come out. Let's look at our passphrase. And it looks like we got the same thing accomplished. Now, look at that. Isn't that much easier to read? We can see, well, we're making some uppercase. We're converting a string to array. We're removing duplicates. We're converting an array-like thing back to an array. And much more declarative. Much more declarative. Plus, we're using pure functions. And we're composing those pure functions together to create a more complex solution that solves our problem. Now, as I mentioned, those libraries contain a compose function if you want to use their compose function. So that's completely up to you. Now, once again, I want to reiterate, this can be a difficult topic. So watch it over again if you're not quite sure yet. And create these things on your own. Walk through this code on your own. That's why I've given you the code file so you can do that. That will help you learn it. Now, these libraries that I talked about also have a function called pipe. Pipe is very similar to compose. And in the functional world, you will hear compose and pipe. They'll both be used. So I want to talk about pipe in the next topic. So let's move on.